What's up, beatbags? It's the often imitated, never duplicated Tony TGD. And today we're going to be discussing this article from Bounding into Comics. It is a report, censorship among key reasons PlayStation brand faces decisive decline in Japan. Now, if we take a look at the article, they're basing this on a ACE Research Institute piece by Hideki Yasuda. Now, the article that they're referencing was written in GameIndustry.biz Japan. And in order for them to get a translation of it, they went over to the wonderful Reset Era forums. And this poster by the name of Sin City Assassin, he posted the article translated. Now, we don't know who translated the article. He doesn't say. He just says that it was a native speaker and it was not him and it was not machine translated. So if you go through the whole thread on Reset Era, a couple of people question whether or not the translation is accurate. No one gives a definitive answer. We don't know. I don't speak or read Japanese. I don't know if the translation is 100% accurate. I did compare it to the Google translated version, and it's pretty similar. There's a few minor changes, a little bit of a tone shift, but nothing that I would qualify as inaccurate or unusable. So we go through the article here from Bounding into Comics. They're basically saying that the Sony censorship policy, which I have spoken about in the past, I've written an article on it. I was able to talk to somebody within Sony that gave me the exact information needed to verify whether or not there is a censorship policy. Spoiler alert, there is. And they basically told me what it was and how it's worded very vaguely from Sony's end in order for them to censor a lot of things, especially anime. But we're not discussing that. That's not what we're here for. We're here to talk about this article from Bounding into Comics. Like I said, they go through and they get to this where they claim that Yasuda cites 5 specific Western-orientated changes he believes were instrumental in contributing to the brand's slow march towards self-destruction. Now, there's a big problem with that. If you go to the translation provided by Reset Era, you'll see that that's not exactly what Yasuda said. Excuse me. It says, however, Sony HQ has told us directly that the value of the Japanese market, a comment that we're grateful to hear. I do think it's highly probable that Sony does take Japan seriously. That said, while their feelings are valuable, their actions do not match those feelings. That's why users believe Sony and CEO Jim Ryan have shown disregard for the Japanese market. In mentioning this, one might think this is a simple conjecture by ACE Economic Research Center. To be a bit more specific, and then he lists the 5 reasons, the same 5 reasons in this Bounding into Comics article. So as you can see, these 5 reasons are not about Sony's decline. They're not about their slow march towards self-destruction. These 5 reasons given by Yasuda are actually reasons they believe that Sony is disregarding the Japanese market. These are reasons that people believe that Sony is putting the American market above the Japanese market. Now, these reasons are that the PlayStation 4 launched in America before it launched in Japan, that Sony has implemented that censorship policy we discussed briefly. The PS5 reveal video had no Japanese narration. The confirmation buttons was changed from the circle button to the cross button. And the manufacturing issues, the initial launch allocation for PS5 in Japan was barely that above the PS3. Now, of all these reasons, the only one that has any effect on the actual console sales would be number 5, the manufacturing issues. We know that there is a global pandemic going on. We know that a lot of electronics are having issues getting the proper amount of items being manufactured. We know that Nintendo had shortages, Xbox had shortages, Atari VCS had some issues, and television, they're having issues with their manufacturing. So we know that this is not just an isolated incident. This is not just isolated to Sony. This is worldwide. Everybody's having some sort of issues at some level, whether or not it's a big issue or a small issue, but there are issues. But if we go over to Reuters, we can see that the Sony PS5 sold out online as pandemic chills real-world retailing. See, in Japan, they were doing that where you had to order online and you come pick it up because they were, doing the social distancing. They didn't want people being in stores, being crowded, being together. But they sold out. And there's actually a secondary market where people are buying from Macari Inc., their version of eBay, consoles for up to $900. So there's not really a decline. If you look, there is still a market. People are still wanting to get a PS5. They just weren't able to get it because, we have shortages. They are sold out in Japan. Now, if we scroll down into this, they talk about Aniplex, the Sony anime, how they're allowed to get away with some stuff that they're not allowed to get away with on the PlayStation. It's understandable. This is quite a concern why two parts of the same company, one is allowed to be a little more explicit in their content and the other part isn't. It's kind of weird, but I mean, this does not have no effect on sales. There's no research done whether or not people have stopped buying Sony products, Sony PlayStations, or Sony software based on this. Nothing in this article to suggest that, just people speculating. And it's fine to speculate. I speculate all the time, but when you're making an article saying that this is a definitive, this is a thing, you should probably at least have some sort of backup, some sort of research, some data, something to kind of, give your speculation a little weight. Now, they did have this nice chart here, and if you look at the article from Bounding into Comics, it says it's the post-launch sales data for 25 years worth of consoles. That's not quite what it is. You see, if you know anything, you know that the PlayStation 5 just came out. You know that the PlayStation 4 hasn't been around for 25 years, so why is it going to the end of the chart? Something about this chart just does not make any sense. So let's go ahead back to that reset error translation thread. We'll go down here. Next, let's look at 25 years of data. Post-launch sales data for 25 years of console. It says the same thing. Well, let's go over to the machine one. Wow, in the machine one it says 25 weeks. Now, see, that makes a lot more sense. Now, what's kind of odd is the reset error thread is claimed to be by a local Japanese person, someone who knows the language. So how would they confuse 25 weeks with 25 years? Seems really odd. So I'm guessing that it's quite possible that the person who translated the reset error thread, the person that made that translation, was wrong because they don't actually speak Japanese. That they probably were a translator or somebody who has a vague knowledge of Japanese and they did their best. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to refer to the machine translated Google version here. And as you can see, PlayStation 5 sales, they're pretty low. They're a little bit above what looks to be, I think this is the PSP. They're a little bit above the PSP sales. But this is during a global pandemic. This is during COVID where manufacturing has slowed down. They don't have the same numbers that they had for the PS3 or the Switch or the Wii. But if you look, the first day sales, first week sales, PlayStation 5 was not the lowest. It wasn't the lowest demand. Dreamcast is a lot lower. This looks to be, it's hard to tell. I'm guessing that's yellow. Maybe it's a PS4. I don't know. But the PS5 is definitely not the lowest interest. Now, it is low right now. We don't know what it'll do. If this stays here at about week 15, then I can agree that maybe there is some kind of decline. But as we get more numbers, as we get more manufacturing, more consoles on the shelves, we'll have a better idea whether or not they're actually in decline or if they're just settling in. Now, of course, they make all kind of conclusions. They want to tell you that this is all due to censorship. This is all due to Sony, disregarding this anime aesthetic and pushing more of a realistic, photorealistic approach. Now, it's quite possible. I mean, Nintendo clearly is embracing its Japanese heritage, its Japanese style, and they're getting a lot of sales. The Switch being a console and a mobile platform is probably helping Nintendo beat Sony. So that's a factor. You got to factor in that, uh, you got Xbox. They're doing a little. So what else we got here? Let's take a look. They're saying he speculated that Japan only represents a minimum of 10% of the home console market. So if Japan is only 10% of the home console market, it makes sense from a business standpoint that they would be pushing the US market, which is supposed to be about 50% of the global gaming market. It would make sense that they would push that side of it a lot more, especially when you consider it says Japan is a market where you can be rewarded with 20 million sales for your effort. But on the machine version, it's a little different. Let me see. Let's get the machine version of translation. Hold up. We're looking for it. Right here, there we go. It is a market that sells more than 20 million units depending on the device. See that right there, that depending on the device, that's very critical to what they're saying. They're saying basically, depending on what it is, you might be able to make 20 million units. And that could mean that if you have a mobile device, you're probably going to sell more than if you have a non-mobile device. But of course, that wasn't included in the article by Bounding into Comics. Another thing not included is this helpful chart about the domestic actual sales trends on a calendar year basis. You see the 3DS, you got the PS4 and the Switch. You can see that the 3DS and the Switch are outselling the PlayStation 4 by a lot, when they're both available. Even the 3DS was outselling the PlayStation 4 when there was no Switch. You got no Switch, and somehow the 3DS is still outselling the PlayStation 4. That tells me that the market in Japan is more mobile gaming. Not mobile gaming like on your phone, but mobile gaming like a device like a Nintendo DS or a Switch, in lieu of something where you have to sit at home and play like a dedicated console. But like I said, that's not included in this whole Bounding into Comics. They don't talk about that. They don't talk about certain things in the ACE Research Institute article, even though it was clearly here on this thread that they referenced. Because you see, that doesn't help them push their narrative. That doesn't help them push this idea that it's completely down to the fact that Sony is censoring things. Now, sure, there might be a small contingent of people in Japan that are upset about this censorship, that they want some anime games, they want games aimed at them, and that could lead to smaller sales. But there is no definitive proof. There's nothing in this article. There's nothing in the article from the ACE Research Institute. There's no chart. There's no data suggesting any of this stuff that I can see, that I've found, that I've looked at, that would suggest that sales are being affected detrimentally by this censorship policy in Japan. Now, we know that this policy is very detrimental to sales here in the United States because Nintendo usually puts out an uncensored version, and then Sony puts out a censored version, and a lot of people they'll flock to the uncensored version. Now, usually this policy of censorship on Sony usually only affects the U.S. Western releases, so I don't see how that would actually be a big concern. That if they're censoring these Japanese titles outside of Japan, that wouldn't really affect Japanese sales. What might affect Japanese sales is the fact that these companies that used to produce products for Japan, they used to produce Sony video games, that they're now going over to Nintendo because they want to sell worldwide uncensored versions. Now, that would make sense. Now, you could have that as an argument, that as a side effect of this censorship, that a lot of developers are jumping ship from Sony to Nintendo, and this is having an effect on sales because people want to still play those games. They still want to play those particular series that are no longer available on Sony due to the developers jumping ship. Now, that's an argument. That's not exactly being affected by censorship. It's more of a side effect due to the censorship, but I mean, it's there. There's a connection. There's a straight line. You could go from point A to point B and you could see it in your mind. But that's not what they bring up. They don't even talk about these companies leaving. They just basically want to say, hey, they're covering up the boobies so people aren't buying. And like I said, there just isn't any data available on it. There's no proof of it. And the fact that PlayStation 5s have sold out in Japan and they're waiting for some more manufacturing tells us there is still a market, and we don't know how much it has declined because we do not have the full scenario on this situation. But really, that's all I want to say about this. I know there's a lot of people who they take this bounding into comics real serious. They're going to take their article, they're going to uncritically look at it and just regurgitate what they say, repeat these things, and just basically blame the censorship policy as for the reason for the decline, which we haven't even seen. There is a decline. But that's all I got to say about this. You know how we do at the channel. Love, peace, booty grease. We out this bitch.